Testing irregularities, grading problems, personnel changes. Tonight, Norfolk Public School officials talk about the troubling headlines surrounding the system. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. It's been a rough couple months for Norfolk Public Schools after allegations of testing irregularities, a state investigation, and now the report is in. Broadly, it points up failures in consistency in training teachers to administer standardized tests. Joining us, Norfolk Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Stephen Jones, along with Norfolk Public Schools School Board Chairman Dr. Stephen Tonelson, and former school board member and current Norfolk City Council member Dr. Theresa Whibley. Thanks to all of you for being with us. I feel like we have everybody we need to have the conversation, right? We have the administrative and then the appointive oversight, and the City Council that funds everything and has oversight over all of it anyway. So thank you all for being here. I know these headlines, Dr. Whibley, have been troubling to folks in Norfolk and who have watched what's going on, may have questions and concerns, and our hope in the half hour is to clear those concerns up and talk about where we go from here. But I wonder if you could talk for a moment about those headlines and what your concerns are.
I've been quoted because I did go out at a city council meeting and mention that, first off, I see a lot of teachers and parents of our students in my office, and many of them were feeling pretty discouraged about not being appreciated and for all the wonderful things that Norfolk Public School is doing. Everybody recognizes that if there are irregularities done on testing, it needs to be, people need to know about it, it needs to be corrected, and we need to know about those corrections. But I think perspective was what I was frustrated with. I wasn't sure that all of the news warranted front page above the fold when we had some pretty significant issues going on in this world, not the least being health care and a war and a few other things. I thought, tell the story, make it clear to everybody, but let's keep it in perspective.
And Dr. Jones, there has been a state report that's just been released on these issues, and I wonder, as we think about the issue of the testing irregularities, those headlines were pretty alarming for people, students perhaps who hadn't been tested, or that there were inconsistencies in the ways that teachers were told to administer those tests. I wonder what your response is to that, and when you picked up the fact that there were some issues.
Well, the whole process of testing is something that we've been doing across the country here in Virginia for almost a decade. Right. So we should have it right. My concern was whether or not there was a systemic approach to taking these tests that suggested that we were not being vigilant in how they were applied. I think there were too many examples in schools where we needed to revisit the protocols and to reinforce the expectations. But to say these issues existed across all 49 schools, the report didn't suggest that, nor were there findings. But I think anytime you have just one irregularity, it's one too many. And I think we need, and we have redoubled our efforts to ensure that these irregularities don't occur again. And so
what when you say you've redoubled the efforts, what sorts of processes are underway?
Instead of saying we're going to require the test coordinators to come to a meeting, we say it's going to be a mandatory meeting. When we say that every teacher coming in is going to be briefed by the principal and not the test coordinator about what the expectations are. When I go to a cluster meeting, I address all of the principals and not just the chief academic officer about the expectations. We say to anyone that if there are irregularities and we find that it's intentional, that there will be consequences associated with it.
So when you think about the way things were and the way things are now with the programs that you've put into place, is it just a tighter ship all the way around?
It's a tighter ship, but I think the big concern, I'm not dodging your question, the implication in the newspapers was that there was widespread cheating.
Yes.
That teachers and principals were intentionally doing this to get their schools accredited.
Right, and you actually wrote that in a letter.
That's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah. And that was a real concern to you, because I know that you wrote that in a letter to pretty directly to parents to say that would be the impression that you would draw, and I want you to know that that's not what's happening.
And that's contrary to everything that this school district stands for and has stood for.
One of the issues that came out that certainly there's been rumbling about in the school system and on some of the online forums and was discussed in the report as well was this idea of a culture of fear of reporting, that folks were afraid if they reported there would be some punishment, that they would suffer some sort of a reprisal about that. That had to be very troubling to hear.
It is, and I had a question posed to me in a similar fashion just recently, and Terry knows, and Dr. Tonelson and Steve knows as well. Everything that we've done in terms of being professional learning organizations is predicated on leadership. We've worked with the greater Norfolk Corporation. All of our principals have gone through the Center of Creative Leadership at Greensboro. We have a leadership matrix that talks about our core values, and all of it, if there's a theme that runs through all of that, is collaboration, being able to work in an environment where we build relationships. So that's contradictory to what the culture we're trying to establish. Now, are there instances where one may feel that there's some intimidation? I'm sure that that's the case, but that's in every organization. But is it something that we work to encourage on the part of leaders? No.
But do you feel like that is a system-wide issue, or do you think that that is a couple of circumstances that where people may have felt that way? One of the things, at least one of the observations people make, is that in this school culture, I'm not talking about Norfolk, I'm talking about generally speaking, that the principal's stamp is on the school, that it's a principal who really sets the tone for leadership in the school. So I wonder, do you think that's a problem for a couple of principals, or is that sort of a system-wide thing that you're now becoming aware of that people may be fearful?
I didn't think it was system-wide, but I need to be sure that it's not. And one of the things that we've done and will continue to do is look at our stakeholder climate study data to determine how students feel, how parents feel, and certainly how teachers feel, not only about each other, but the leadership and the building, in this case, the principal, as well as support from central
office. And I know
office.
you've put a telephone in for people to call if
Yes.
they do have concerns, I guess an anonymous sort of tip line, something
Yes.
like that. Yeah, and a lot of organizations are doing that these days. Dr. Tonelson, and we should note, in case you're unclear about how this works out, there's the school administration, which runs things on a day-to-day basis, and then the school board is primarily responsible for vision and oversight and the rest, and policy, right? Yes. So as you look at some of the policy questions here, and your board has come under fire, as you know, for a concern that people have that perhaps your board was not as vigilant in its oversight of these issues as it might have been. How do you respond to those charges?
I think that the lack of vigilance is perhaps an appearance of our unwillingness to publicly talk about personnel issues. And so at the same time we're addressing issues, I think because we choose not to do that in a public forum, it may appear that very little is being done, and I would suggest otherwise.
Yeah. And this is an interesting point when it comes to personnel issues, because the truth is personnel issues are often discussed in an executive session in sort of a private way that's protective of the person who may be the subject of those conversations. So as you reflect back on these last couple of months, is there anything that you think going forward you would change about that issue of appearance, about the struggle between appearing perhaps not to be as vigilant on the oversight versus what you may really think is going on?
I would very much want to err on the side of protecting an individual who has not completely gone through whatever due process that we would have for them. And I believe it's important to Norfolk Public School personnel that we are willing to take some hits in order that they get the due process that they deserve. So I think I would always be uncomfortable moving forward publicly, So,
what are you hearing as you go out in the community about this issue?
well, obviously we're very concerned about the irregularities, and all of us as a board hear about, what are you doing, what's going on, and I think we hear the concerns of the greater Norfolk community, we hear the concerns of parents and teachers, so the public schools community, but for the most part I think that what many people now are saying is that these testing irregularities happened a year ago. We're really happy that you have put into place procedures that should preclude them happening again, or at least minimize the likelihood of them happening again. And we're also hearing that, I guess, a mixture. Some people would say if someone is being paid by the taxpayers and does something wrong, it should be very public. And then we hear that it's, a wonderful thing that you're doing to protect.
Yeah, welcome to public service.
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
Right, exactly. So, Dr. Whibley, and I know that you're aware of this, you will have the opportunity here pretty shortly to appoint some new school board members. There has been a great conversation that's getting started, and every community has it from time to time, about whether one should have appointive school boards or elective school boards. Norfolk, of course, is an appointive situation. I wonder, philosophically, where are you on that issue of elective or appointive?
I feel very strongly that we should continue with appointed. I've been on the appointed side of this. I'm aware of the lack of research that demonstrates any advantage over elected boards. In fact, much research that demonstrates appointed has been more effective. I'm concerned about politicizing a board. I'm concerned about the expense of running for office for a school board that would restrict people that would otherwise be good applicants. I do think that Norfolk can do a better job of appointing, and I don't mean that who we've appointed hasn't been good, but the way we've done it I don't think has been as good as it might be. So I've offered some opportunities for change.
And so when you say opportunities for change, what would you like to see, or what have you put on the table?
I think we should actively recruit people that might be interested, and I think we should take all applicants. If we can, get rid of this nominating process, which I think is kind of inane, and have interviews that are open by the whole council so that the public is available to see who are applicants.
Dr. Jones, I guess you've probably worked in both, haven't you? Elective and appointive. Yeah. What's your take? Clearly you like this one for the moment, I suppose, because till June 30th, you're here. So I wouldn't ask you to step out on a limb there. But I do wonder.
I have to say, in parting, Cathy, I've worked in Baltimore, in New York, and here in Virginia, and I've been blessed with the school board here. And one of the benefits is that you don't see the political affiliations. And in New York, boards are elected, and they typically, the candidates align themselves with political parties.
Oh, really?
And if you think that there's a divide in Washington, there is a similar divide in every school district where you've got Republican and Democratic board members. That's not the case here. The board that hired me and the board that I'm currently working for, by all accounts, they're focused on improving achievement for students. I think Dr. Tonelson raised one point, the ability to raise funds, to raise through a levy to fund education is an issue that could be discussed with appointed boards. And I don't know that that's necessarily something that the charter would allow, but that would be the only downside.
You're talking about if I understand this, that in an elected school board system, those are often boards that have taxing authority and can raise funds, and so an appointive system, obviously it has to still go through City Council.
Elected boards tend to view their role as an elected official with constituent service. School boards are most effective when 7 or 10 or 12 come together as a board to make decisions, I think.
As you look at the last couple of months and think through all these issues, which I'm sure all of you have had time to do that and think through some sort of conclusions out of that, I wonder, What would you have done differently? What are you proud of? What do you think, gosh, if I had that one to do over again, I'd probably do that one differently? What do you think about on those kinds of issues?
I think at the time when this issue broke about the irregularities, I was pretty much consumed with how we were dealing with the public reaction to our new grading system.
Right.
And I think had I been more forthcoming and played this up with Dr. Tonelson in a more timely fashion to keep the board informed as we were working through this, I didn't realize it was going to be as expansive. But I have to say, and not necessarily in defense, the big issue for us right now is the application of an alternative assessment for special ed students, special needs students, called the VGLA, the Virginia Grade Level Assessment. And it's being applied inconsistently across the entire state. As a matter of fact, we were accused of using that as a way of propping up performance on the part of our special needs students, and approximately 4% of our kids are taking the VGLA, where there are districts upwards of 50%. There are almost just under 100 districts statewide that are on notice by the state of the misuse of the VGLA. And as I said to the state, it would be wonderful that they would put the same kind of scrutiny in those areas that they're putting in Norfolk. I mean, I'm not saying that misery loves company, but I think it's only fair that we would see a complete picture of what clearly is a systemic problem for the state board.
So you think this is really a state issue, clearly because of the fact that other school divisions are dealing with it?
I mean, for us to be penalized and be above the fold every other week, the newspaper's done 42 stories about testing irregularities here in Norfolk, and they've yet to put it in the context of what's going on around the state.
As you think about that, do you feel targeted in some respect?
Well, I'm not going to say we've got a target on our back. I mean, it is what it is, and we've got to work through it. But as Terry said, we're a very proud school district. We have teachers. I mean, if there's one thing that comes out clear with any conversation, we have the hardest working teachers in the region. They have a challenge that most people don't even realize until they're in the buildings. And for them to be demeaned the way the newspaper has characterized the district, it's not just individual schools, it's the entire school district. And it's not fair to those individuals that work hard every day and doing everything by the book.
I think, if I remember this correctly, the district itself asked for this state investigation. Is that the district itself? And what was the decision making? I mean, what made you decide we really need to do something here?
I think that the perception of the community was that we have big issues in our schools.
So sort of to demonstrate we're not afraid of this, let's shine a light on it and see what's going on.
Let's ask someone who's completely objective to come in and to assess the way we're doing business in Norfolk and to tell us, okay, you're doing great or you're not, but to have that light that says we're willing to open up to anyone who wants to come in. And we felt strongly that it was important to show the community that we were doing, the vast majority of our people are doing exactly what they should be doing, and we were confident that a state review would help us demonstrate
Kathy,
that.
it's important to note, not to cut Dr. Tonelson off, that this was something that was mutually agreed upon. The state called, the state superintendent called me and said, Dr. Jones, whatever technical support you need, we're prepared to do that. And if I had said, I don't think we need any support, I think she would have said, but I think you need some. So, I mean, we wanted, this is something that was mutual, and on our part and their part, they wanted to clear the air to show, because as goes Norfolk in terms of the application of the VGLA goes to state. And if we can demonstrate that we can do it and clean it up appropriately so that those various requirements and protocols associated with the application, this is an assessment where you collect data over the course of the year and how it's graded and how it's collected and how it's graded. So it isn't a paper and pencil test. So in order for us to do it and get a seal of approval, it then sets in place a template that can be applied to these other districts. But as it stands now, they're going to move away from the VGLA because of the number of complaints that they received across the state about the application of that assessment.
So how do you think they ought to be doing that? I mean, if they move away from VGLA, what would you?
Well, they've been testing, field testing, an online assessment that allows for an immediate response on the part of the students. So it's not a period of time where something has to be collected.
Yeah, and Dr. Whibley, you know, you're the one at this table who has experience as a council person and as a school board representative. What do you tell your council colleagues about this situation, and what are you hearing in the community?
Well, I'm hearing confusion in the community, and I'm hearing confusion on council. And I think the perception was, as Steve alluded to, that somebody had taken those little answer sheets that we fill in black marks on and altered them in some way. There was quite a bit of confusion about what this testing was for our special ed children. I think people were feeling that this was apparent at every school. The last headline, I believe, said that there was widespread problems noted, and yet then further down, if you read it, it was 6 schools that they had looked at. So, you know, I think people would come to me and they'd say, what are we going to do about Norfolk? And then when I would talk to them about what had happened, they'd go, oh, okay, and would feel much more comforted, because most of them had had positive experiences in the school system and wanted to continue those feelings and felt validated after having that discussion.
I know you had some concerns about the media coverage of this as well, which you were vocal about in the newspaper. I'm one in the Virginian Pilot, I should say. What has been the response? Have you shared those concerns with the newspaper, and I wonder what their response has been?
Well, I think there was a column written about me that said I was whining, so I guess that would be the first response I've heard. And as everything's taken out of context a little bit, and they didn't understand that I would never want to thwart any news being represented, but I just wanted to make sure that there was a perspective, and I think the paper gets to decide what they think is going to be important. So one of my friends who used to work on the paper said, you're not going to be able to beat the print.
So, Dr. Jones, here we are. You're retiring June 30th. A search for your successor is underway. I know that you've said this is not exactly how you wanted to wrap things up in Norfolk Public Schools. But I wonder, as you think about this, because you've had a long and distinguished career over time, how do you put this within the 1 minute that we have left for a big question about perspective? How do you put this in perspective in terms of your work here?
I'm saddened because this has been this city has been so good to me, and the teachers, the professionals. I can't tell you that there's a group of people that I admire more, and for them to have this disdain, so to speak, over them as I depart is probably the most unsettling thing that has happened to me in my career. But I can't change that. The only thing I can say, I've decided that this is going to be my home. I'm not leaving. So if I can redeem myself in some way over the next several years in some other volunteer capacity, I plan to do that.
Well, I want to thank you all. That's part of the reason why we wanted to do the show, to give you an extended opportunity just to kind of talk about these issues. So I want to thank all of you for being with us. We really appreciate it. And we're back in just a moment. One of the refrains rising up in response to the state's report on Norfolk Public Schools is a call for elected school boards. You heard newly elected city councilman and high school administrator Tommy Smeagol advocate for it last week on this broadcast. Now, there are some powerful arguments for elected school boards. In the case of what Norfolk's going through, there's an opportunity to hold members accountable at the ballot box instead of relying on city council to do it. But like any choice, there are pros and cons. For example, I have the privilege of leading an organization called the Civic Leadership Institute, which brings together accomplished leaders across the region and attempts to imbue them with an even greater sense of service to Hampton Roads. And for the most part, these are highly successful people who know how to lead organizations, hold out a vision, and make resources available to accomplish goals. Just what we need in school systems across the country, I suspect. But if you ask them, and I have, whether they will run for an office like school board or city council, they will often say, no thanks. They don't want to put their families through the ordeal, and they don't want to spend so much of their time fundraising for the next election. Now, they will often accept a board appointment because they'd rather focus their energies on doing the work instead of running the race. It should be noted that Norfolk won the prestigious Broad Prize for Urban Education in 2005 with an appointed school board. It's the largest education prize in the country and honors urban districts making strides in student achievement and reducing the achievement gap. The prize carries scholarship money for the winner and 4 finalists, and Norfolk's been in that top 5 3 times in the past decade. The greatest challenge, it seems to me, is not testing irregularities, but the concern about a culture of fear in the system. Fear crushes innovation and breeds mediocrity, creating an environment we can ill afford in something as important as our children's future. You can watch any of our programs online at whatmatters.tv. While you're there, tell us what you think, and you can sign up for our weekly newsletter so we can let you know what we have in the works. And for more local talk, I hope you'll join us on the radio dial for Hearsay on 89.5 WHRV every weekday at noon, and we'll take your calls there live. Thanks again for watching. I'm Cathy Lewis. We'll see you next time for another look at What Matters.